and gentlemen, and welcome to another very special edition of the Geeks Who Like Sports Leaderboard interviews. We have a very special guest today, but first, as always, I am Ray Carcillo in Los Angeles, California, joined by my best friend in the entire world over in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Lee Elias. And the third person on today's call is a tremendous actress and singer. You might know her. Our geek crowd might know her from Deep Space Nine, might know her from the Doctor Who audio episodes, but she also, of course, is the founder of an amazing a group called the Pop Culture Hero Coalition that, of course, is a nonprofit that speaks out against bullying, racism, misogyny, and other forms of hate. The one and only Chase Masterson is here. Chase, how are you doing today?
I'm great, and I'm so excited to be with you guys. How are you?
Doing fantastic. We're thrilled to have you on the show, and we think this is going to be this is going to be a special episode because Lee and I talk about this all the time. We definitely think that a lot of our views against anti-bullying and of course geekdom being an inclusive society, I think very much aligned. So we think this is going to be a great time today.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate you guys having me.
Awesome. Well, to get things started, I guess the most obvious question is, what made you want to start the Pop Culture Hero Coalition, and maybe give a little more detail about what it is and what it does?
Thank you so much. As I was talking to myself about what we would talk about today, as I was brainstorming about the intersections between geekdom and sports, and also with the coalition, I found a lot of commonality, as you just said. And what I love about science fiction and what I love about sports is also what I love about Pop Culture Hero Coalition. There's a love of story, and there is an empathy for each other's stories. It's, the greatest moments, I think, in sports are when you find out that somebody who was an underdog made it and is accomplishing greater things that they could imagine that they could ever accomplish. Hence, I have my Cubs shirt right here, and always at the ready. And that goes way back. It's the same with science fiction. We love these stories of heroism. We love seeing people encounter all sorts of challenges and still rise to the top and still work on not only themselves but on making it a better world. We love seeing the underdog win. We love seeing heroes overcome challenges. And because I am well aware through my own life and through my eyes being open to the world, because I'm well aware to the challenges that people face in terms of having been bullied, in terms of racism, misogyny, LGBTQI plus bullying, cyberbullying. There's so much opposition there that people face these days. And I wanted to do something that would help people, encourage them, help them find resilience, and also to teach the bullies, frankly, that it's so much more fun to be kind and open and inclusive. And so from there, we've morphed into doing a lot of mental health work, because I realized that, well, not just my team, I have an incredible team I'll tell you about. We realized that mentally healthy people want other people to also succeed. And mentally healthy people don't bully each other. And one more thing, the reason that people have, enact bullying is because of inner insecurity and a lack of healthy identity. So all of that, really, I guess that's a long-winded answer, saying that it ties into the same reasons. It ties into stories and a desire to see people succeed.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know. Me and Lee. We were both. I was very much bullied growing up. I know Lee also is even though he's a hockey player, was also he was the guy who liked Star Wars. So he also has a feeling of that, and we know that it's you kind of find what's been amazing about this is that it kind of opens up. It helps, like you said, open people's eyes to not just find, for people like us who are growing up and probably didn't have that group to kind of to gel with, but to also the people who were kind of our antagonists, our the bullies, kind of get them to join in with us too, and realize that we're all on the same team here. We're all on the same the same side at the end of the day. We all should really be wanting ourselves to do well. I mean, and it's like me and Lee always joke, because Lee, of course, you mentioned your Cubs. Lee's a Phillies fan. I'm a Yankees fan. And we always kind of go back and forth also with our football teams, Eagles and Giants. But we still, because we're such good friends, we kind of rib each other, but we still want each other to be happy and to succeed, because that's the way life should be.
Absolutely.
So,
and you know, when you realize that everyone is only acting on what they have on the inside, you realize that bullies are just hurting people. We have a saying with the coalitions, we're not the first people to say this, but we say it a lot, which is hurt people, and healed people, heal people. So
I like that a lot. That's good.
Right? And so, Lee, I want to say I'm very sorry that you were bullied, and it was never your fault. It never had anything to do with you. It was always about the bully and their insecurity. And that's something really important to keep in mind when we encounter it, you know, currently, or when we look back on it.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, you know, Chase, first off, I got to tell you, it's really hard. One of the things I was nervous about when we're recording this episode is I want to call you Leeta so much because of my time with Star Trek. So it's funny because I've kept telling myself, you have to call her Chase. That's her name. So for those of you listening that didn't watch Deep Space Nine, her character's name is Leeta.
Right now. I'm just
I appreciate it because like it's almost like being at a con for me right now in a weird way. But here's the thing. I was looking through your curriculum, and one of the things I love that I read about was, you know, you help people find their origin story. And I love the language with that. And one thing I want to do quickly was I realized when reading that I've never shared my origin story on this show before pertaining to being bullied. So Ray and I often reference that it's a weird time in geek culture where we call it kind of a golden age, where a lot of geek properties right now are extremely popular. Whereas when we were younger, it was not a cool thing to like comic books and to like Star Wars and Star Trek and all these things.
Batman, yeah.
So you know, we're living in this golden age now. But what's funny, and I'll try and get this through real quick because I don't want this episode to be about me. But
no,
you know, as Ray said, I appreciate it. That means a lot. See, I almost called you Leeta there, but I caught myself and I stopped. So that's good.
You can call me Leeta if you want.
Okay.
Don't give him that. Don't give him that bone. Don't give him that. No. He's got to be a professional today.
He doesn't want me to call you that because then it means I get to call him nicknames too. So we'll stay away from that for now. But here's the
or Julian. I can call you Julian if you'd like, or Rom.
Do I look like him? So Bashir was a great character, but here's the deal. Okay, when I was young, elementary school age, I was teased relentlessly. Some of it was my own fault. I would play the victim a lot at that time, and I learned a lot to get out of that. I was in therapy for a little bit of time. People don't know about that, but I have no problem talking about that. So it really helped me kind of build myself up. Now, luckily for me, when I was in middle school, let's just say I hit the start of my manhood a little early in terms of growing big, and I became an athlete very quickly and got into ice hockey. But at this time, this was my life, and this is why I wanted to go get my props before the show. I carried around in my backpack because I have a love for ice hockey, a massive love for ice hockey, okay? So I carried around this gigantic hockey encyclopedia in my backpack, and the other book that I carried around in my backpack was this, which was the Star Trek Encyclopedia, okay? So here I am walking around my high school with these two books, and I'm like referencing this during lunch. Like, that's what I did, right? So if you can imagine this, the way it was in my high school, and by high school, I was really becoming an emerging hockey player. But I loved Star Trek and Star Wars and comics. So the way they had our cafeterias was the upperclassmen, 11th and 12th grade were on one side, and the underclassmen, 9th and 10th grade, were on the other side. But I was sitting with the kids that liked Star Trek and Star Wars, not the hockey players. So if you can imagine this, it's like a 6-foot kid sitting with 5'5" scrawny kids who were my best friends. And, we're discussing Deep Space Nine and, what's going to happen to Bajor and Captain Sisko. This is before we knew what the ending was. And I'll never forget this because this was my origin moment. This is when I knew what I had to do. A ninth grader wandered over, right, to our cafeteria. And I was in line still getting my food. So at this time, I would come over with 2 trays of food. As a growing boy, as my mother would say. The kids I was at, the people I was eating with would have a pretzel, right? So it just didn't make sense. So this 9th grader comes over and he starts making fun of my friends. And I can see him in line. And he's just saying, you guys are losers. Star Trek is stupid. Star Wars is stupid. Typical bullying stuff you always hear. And I kind of had a smirk on my face because I wasn't there yet. So I walk over to the table And I stood behind him, and I was bigger than this young man at the time. And it was a funny moment because, follow me, I wasn't going to bully anybody, but my friends started laughing because they knew I was going to defend them. And the ninth grader saw me. He was an athlete too, and he turns around and he goes, "Yo, man, how tease these nerds," right? And I remember I said, "Hey, man, those are my." Go ahead.
It just broke up. He said what?
He turned to me and he said, "They'll help me make fun of these nerds." Like he thought I was going to join in with them.
Oh.
Right. So again, they all had smiles on their face because they knew it was about to happen. But I didn't lose my cool. I said, "Hey, man, these are my best friends, like ever." And it's like just completely weird look on his face, like what am I going to do here? I said, "Why don't you go back to your cafeteria and before we have a conversation you can't handle?" I guess I wasn't going to try and bully him back. And he's walking away, and I'll never forget this. I said, as he's walking away, I said, "May the force be with you." And the whole table cheered. And I remember thinking, because I wasn't gonna fight him or anything like that. That's not where I was going with this. But I realized in that moment that like I'm not letting this happen anymore, right? Like I am a geek who likes sports. All right, and it never left. Yeah, and then what's funny is fast forward to where we are today. Now Ray and I met each other in college. We hit it off right away. Again, this is decades ago, and we had been talking on the phone for a year, just about sports geekdom every single day. And I remember after a year, I said, "Man, we should really just make a podcast. There has to be other people out there like us that like these two things." And lo and behold, a year later, we've been doing this. We have you on as a guest. We've had other people on, and the audience has just been growing. And this is the end of the story, okay? Because I don't go on a lot here. I'm excited about it. All right, but what's exciting about your coalition, what you do, what we do, and the message is that are a community. I was reading about the start of your organization with the young lady that got teased in high school or teased at school about liking Star Wars, and how the community came to surround her. And then you go to cons and you go to conventions and you see the people that go to these things and how tight knit we are, but how kind we are and how we want to take care of each other. And it's such a heartwarming feeling. And to know, I think that's been the best part for Ray and I, is to know there's other people out there like us has been so warming. And then just like you, we want to spread that love and that feeling to let anyone out there know, you're not alone, and that we're challenging this together. So that's the origin story from birth to today.
I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, like, that's really it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. I mean, that you said it all. How beautiful in so many ways. How beautiful that you stood by your people, that you found your voice, that you weren't afraid, that you didn't, shrink back because you thought you would get bullied later, or or any of that. How wonderful that you said what you meant to say. And that can be a difficult thing sometimes, and you were an example of a hero that day to your friends. And I have no doubt that that impacted probably the rest of their school years, knowing that you had their back and they could have each other's backs. And, that kind of thing is so important in those formative years. Really, kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ray, thank you.
Yeah, it was good to know that, like I said, I didn't identify as just a hockey player. I wanted them to know, like, Lee identifies as this to all of you. I mean, this is who I am. And it was great. Now, we can't end the episode there because I have too many DS9 questions to ask you. Again, I did tell you I walked around with this encyclopedia. My day coming home from school is I would come home from school, literally play hockey outside until 5 o'clock, and when I would run inside to watch DS9. That was my life for a long time. But we'll get to that later because I want Ray to have the next question.
That's so nice. And can I just chime in and say one other thing here? It's, just the title of the show, Geeks Who Like Sports. Geeks Who Love Sports?
Geeks
love?
Who like, yeah.
Okay.
But you can love them too. I mean, we like them. We like sports, love sports. Yes.
Geeks Who Need Sports.
Yes.
Just that is a sign of the times that we grew up in. I also grew up in this era where there was not a lot of crossover, and especially where I grew up, which was Texas, and it was slightly before you. And it just, you were either one or the other, and it wasn't like there was an acceptance of or an understanding of like, wow, how cool, you've got your fandom, we've got ours. It wasn't like that at all. It was like separate, and that's one thing that we can't afford to have in this world, because you have that separateness in school, and it hurts, and then then that goes on to create more separateness in the workplace, and then in society, in the zeitgeist of equality in society, and standing up for other people at all, standing up for essential workers, standing up for people who make less money or have less education. There can't be any us and them in this world. It doesn't work that way. So good for you for bridging the gap.
We're trying.
It was a big moment. Yeah.
That's a wonderful moment, and I'm so glad you shared it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to it.
Job.
So Lee mentioned that he kind of feels like he's at a con right now, and unfortunately, speaking of the times, we're recording this on Memorial Day. A lot of the cons that we all frequent, unfortunately, are kind of being canceled because of the pandemic going on right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But one of the endeavors that your organization is doing right now is called the Heroic Journey at Home, to also help with those of us who are, might be struggling, but obviously we're stuck staying at home under stay-at-home orders or quarantining. Tell us a little bit about what the Heroic Journey at Home is, and how people can find the help if they need help while they're at home.
That's so wonderful. Thank you, Lee. I love that you guys do your homework. I mean, not everybody does. Fantastic. So Heroic Journey at Home is an adaptation of the curriculum that our team created for kids in schools. And our curriculum in schools is geared toward middle school, because we all know middle school is hell. And in fact, your story just now was, in those years, the 7th through 9th grade years, right? Where it just, everyone's finding their identity, and it can be very difficult. Kids are entering new schools, either a junior high school or a high school, and it just is, it's really tough. And then hormones and, dating and that, oh my God.
Yeah. Fun times. Yeah.
Yeah, fun times. So in 2000, I'll tell you a little bit of our origin story. In 2015, I was doing a convention in Connecticut, and there were about 20 people in this room, and I was talking about the coalition's work, which at that point was only at Comic-Cons and Star Trek cons. And after this hour talk for like 20 people, it was kind of like, really, oh my gosh, I flew all the way across the country and 20 people showed up for me. Oh no, but I mean, whatever. It was just one of those things. And I was happy to be there. But of all times, that tiny panel, a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I love what you're doing. I think you should work with Yale. And I was like, oh yeah, have them call. And she said, no, really, Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence is doing this type of work in schools, but you have a portal to kids' minds and hearts that not even they have. And we started thinking about that, and she set us up with a call with Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, the founding director, and Mark Brackett. He's a brilliant man. And we talked, and he said, you should put this into a curriculum. You should put this work into schools. So we're sitting there going, okay, I guess. And Carrie, my partner, Carrie Goldman, is an absolutely amazing author and speaker. She said, yeah, we should do this work. We should create a curriculum, and you should license it from us. And I was like, Carrie, you don't say that to Yale. You don't say they can license your work. And Dr. Mark Brackett looked at her and said, that's a very good idea. And so we started creating this work for schools and other places to license. And we brought in pop culture fluent clinical psychologists. So, for instance, Dr. Janina Scarlett has Superhero Therapy, which is a podcast and a book and a series of books about using superheroes, including Star Trek, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Supergirl, all of it, to teach empathy. And empathy is what ends bullying. And Dr. Andrea Letamendi, who was one of our curriculum creators, has a podcast on Batman. And she describes him as her first. I know.
For those of you who can't see, if you're listening to the audio, I just stood up a little straighter with my Batman shirt on.
Yeah, Batman shirt. Yeah. And so her podcast is the Arkham Sessions. She is Arkham Asylum Doc, and
that's awesome.
Right? She did a TED Talk of Batman being her first love as a psychologist, and what got her into doing this work. And so the fact that it's relatable to kids is so exciting, and relatable to adults as well. Yeah. And so we were putting this work into schools this spring. We did a pilot last fall. It took us 4 years to create the curriculum, put it all together, and we were actually going to pilot the work. Start putting the work out into schools in March. And because our pilot ended in January, and March is when the world fell apart.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about these kids who were at home with brother and sisters that bullied them, or LGBTQ kids with parents that don't understand them, that, and life can be hell. And started to think about the people that don't have their support systems. Maybe they just live to be able to go out to see their friend or their friends, or to the club or to the park or whatever it is, and none of that exists right now. So we very quickly adapted to being the heroic journey at home, and we're super proud of this work. Dr. Janina Scarlett has adapted it, and we're also putting together a series of videos for parents to be able to lead their children or teens through this work and say, hey, if you're experiencing anxiety, so did Superman,
Yeah.
And the way that he dealt with his kryptonite was this, and this is how you can build your resilience against the things and the enemies and the jokers in your world.
One of the cool things you're bringing up, and one of the cool things about Superman is that he sees the good in people, and one of the internal conflicts that he always has to deal with is that of he is a god amongst men. So is Supergirls, who are all the people from Krypton, and they have to, they could enslave the human race, but they choose to see the good in people. And I think one of the things about what's going on in the world right now, and Ray and I have talked about this in depth, both on and off the show, is that if you're not careful and you stay inside and you end up watching TV or the internet a lot, it's a lot of fear right now. It's just a lot of people scared. There's a lot of unknowns. It seems like almost a bad comic book storyline. And what we've been telling people, because we have a lot of people that reach out to us, which is always humbling, about how our show helps them get through the day. And it means more to Ray and I than really anything else we get, I think, comment-wise. But one of the things we tell them is, hey, listen, just go outside for a few minutes, even if it's hard to do that, and look around. Look around. There's people in all these homes, and we're all going through this together. The sun is up. We'll keep moving. Make sure to wash your hands, obviously, but just go outside and get away from the box, because it's going to drown you in fear. And again, there are other people. We're all, everyone says this, we're all going through this together, and we're employing people. You got to practice that, though. You got to know that we're all going through it, and each one of us has a different level of what we're going through. Like, for example, and you asked us when we called you, how are you doing? And again, I'm fortunate. I'm doing very well. But I have a 3-year-old and I have a 6-year-old, and my wife is a doctor. So we have those challenges. But there's no difference between our challenges and what Ray is dealing with in Los Angeles, or what some of our listeners are dealing with, or people who have teenage kids. Again, we're all in it together. And I find that, if we try and do this, who's got it worse or better, it doesn't solve any issues, right? We're all in this together. You have to see the good in people. There is so much more good out there than people realize. And I always found that that's a warming thing for my heart. And like you said, especially for people that are dealing with a challenging time, or they're in middle school, or they have high anxiety. I know we have several listeners with high anxiety. You have to reach out. You have to look for those people. But I love the approach. I love that. Yeah, I love how you talked about Yale too, about licensing the program. And I love that you were, you had the clairvoyancy to say, look, we have to adjust this program now to be at home. it's almost like it was created for this in a weird way, right? That like, this is just a hand you were dealt.
Well, thank you. I mean, that the curriculum was created for homes or for.
Well, in the sense of it applied itself to people at home right now, whereas you couldn't have predicted the pandemic, but like things happen the way they're supposed to, right? Like maybe it was created and it might not be what you had originally intended, but now there's almost a reason in your face for this. Look, we need this right now. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yes, it's practicing resilience. It's practicing making lemonade, and we certainly would have loved to have this program be in its full force. I mean, it's a program we put together for 4 solid years. And we based the at-home edition on it, but we had a lot of adaptation to do too.
Oh, I believe. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's by far, it's not even on the radar of the worst things that are happening here. And we do have to realize that there are people. I hope that your wife is okay. I mean, there are people on the front lines. And so for those of us who are not on the front lines, nothing we're experiencing is, wait, let me just take that back. Everything we're experiencing is valid. The feelings of depression, anxiety, loneliness, isolation, frustration, stir crazy, bouncing off the walls, all of that is valid. And part of the ways that we can navigate those feelings is in gratitude that we're not homeless people. We're not in the food lines. We are not in situations where this could spread beyond our even remote ability to have control.
Yeah.
We're incredibly privileged, and so both things can be true. We're upset, but we're also grateful. And I think you've got to hold both in your heart at once, right?
Absolutely. And, I'll tell you this too, is when I work with sports teams, it's a lot of the work I do in sports is with teams or just team building. I have them keep a gratitude journal. And I've always been amazed at the outcome of those things, because I get a lot of groans when I say it's time to do your gratitude journal, but it really does keep them even keeled. And I've worked with inner city kids in Philadelphia who none of them come from 2-parent households. And, when I read their gratitude journal, it really gives me perspective, and I have nothing to be upset about. And then the other side of that too, my wife is my hero, and Ray will tell you, I've been saying that for years. It's nothing new, but my wife is my hero, and I look up to her, even though she's 5'8", but it's one of those things. If you want to find it, you can find it. You just have to have the strength to look. And I know that's not always the easiest thing for people to do, especially when you're dealing with depression or you're feeling like the world's closing in on you. It's tough to stand up. But, if more people outreach their hand and say, I'm here for you, I've always been amazed at the power of just that. And that goes back to the empathy you were talking about. I'm here for you too. So again, not to get too emotional with it, but we just love everything that you stand for, everything you've built. And we hope when the pandemic passes, you can show this off in its full glory that you wanted to, and so forth and so on. Now,
you stand for it. I'd love to hear more too. I didn't know that much prior to the show, but you work with sports teams, and tell me a little bit about what you guys do in daily life, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So again, Ray's out in Los Angeles. Ray, I'll let you tell her about you, and then I'll jump on me.
Oh, me, I'm not nearly as interesting as Lee. I just play video games for a living.
Yeah. My best friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, much like Lee, we met in college, like he mentioned, and we both were studying media and back east at Montclair State University, which is a smaller school, state school in New Jersey. And both of us started on the sports path. I worked at ESPN for several years. Lee worked at the NHL. And from ESPN, not to get into it, there was a lot of politics there. There's an interesting situation that can sometimes happen in the corporate world. And I kind of decided to make a left turn and started writing about video games, which was something that was always passionate about me and kind of to me and for me. And it was kind of to Lee's point, like I was bullied a lot too. And really it was video games that got me through a lot of the tough times when I was growing up. And also a quick shout out to our good friend of ours, Bradley Marsh, who actually similarly started a thing called Mental Health Gaming, which is all about using video games to help cope with anxiety and depression and bullying and all the things that a lot of us go through. But similarly, so for me, when the sports thing seemed to stall, I went to video games. I went back to what I had gotten me through all the tough times growing up. And then I started writing about them, and I joined Electronic Gaming Monthly, which was at the time, the longest running video game magazine continuously since the 80s. And I was their reviews editor. And then I worked at Warner Brothers for a couple of years. And now I'm back working at a video game company, actually making the games. So yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. So now I'm which is why, again, likely very fortunate that I can work from home during this time where I know a lot of other folks who obviously they've been furloughed or they've completely lost their job altogether and they're struggling with unemployment. And that's why, like Lee talks about gratitude and all that stuff. And both of us are very, very grateful and fortunate that we are able to continue to work and do have fun and do the podcast and do things, that like this to try and help others out there is a little bit that we can do. And that we're also fortunate enough that we have money coming in and that we're able to continue to work, and we're very, very lucky. But that's me. That's me.
Ray, if I may, because I'm going to make you blush here. Okay. The thing that, because Ray doesn't like to talk about himself, and I appreciate you doing that, Ray.
No.
The thing that makes Ray special, this is something people don't know about Ray. He is the first member of his family to leave New Jersey after they arrived in the country, and he is doing what every single person in his life told him that he could not do, which is you can't leave New Jersey and work in geek sports and video games. And he has literally made a life doing that. So you are a bright, shining light, even though you're the Batman of the Superman-Batman relationship that you and I have.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The bat signal is always on, and it's a symbol of hope for people. And I'm the blind optimist from another planet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Philadelphia's another planet, yeah.
You guys aren't the best. This is so awesome.
Thank you. But I really do hold Ray in high esteem. And then Chase, to answer your question, yeah. So I wear many hats. Outside my geek hat, I have a organization that works with sports teams based on a coaching philosophy that I've developed, which is all about team bonding and its importance to really any team, whether it's business or sports, finding success. Like you cannot win, however you define the word, without team bonding. So a good portion of my life is dedicated to that company, which we don't talk about too much on here. So I appreciate you asking. But it really is about teamwork and finding that common ground and building something together. And it's funny because the bond that I always reference in my books and my speaking is the same bond that the geek community shares. And it's funny to me. And you said this at the beginning of the episode. You don't have to go far from a sports team bond to a geekdom bond to any bond. A bond is a bond. And I find that especially today, and this is leading to a question for you because I want your thoughts on this, in a time that it seems like we couldn't be more polarized, I find in my line of work that actually people more than ever want to be part of something, right? That we're actually so far apart, however you look at that people are yearning to be part of something. That's almost why we're so far apart, because we feel like we have to join a group. Humans want to be together. I've said this before. Yep. Even the biggest introvert on the planet at some point wants to believe in something larger than themselves. That's just human nature. Okay. And I mean, in fact, geek culture would not exist if that wasn't true. Right. That is the heart of geekdom, of the heart of Star Trek alone and the universe that was created there from Gene Roddenberry's vision. All about hope. It's about togetherness. So in your experience, and again, you've been involved with some of the most major geek platforms in the world, Star Trek, Doctor Who. Do you see that? Do you believe that? Do you feel that communities are coming together? Do you think that that's the answer to everything going on right now?
Thank you. I do believe that there is more empathy in the world now than there was pre-coronavirus, for instance. I do feel that there is more gratitude in the world. I think people are awake to what we have and the health issues a lot. We don't tend to be grateful for our health because it unless we have had health issues, it has come naturally. And if you have had health issues, of course you're grateful when you don't. But bottom line is people are aware, I think, of the good things that we have in a different way than before this happened. One thing I really hope is that, well, there's a lot of things I really hope. First, I hope, and I'm just going to say this right out, we are living in appreciation for healthcare workers, for hospital workers, for people who have the tiniest, there is no tiny job is my point, is what would be seen as the tiniest job. Like a custodian in the basement of a hospital is a hero. And we realize now, these people that are showing up to work anywhere near a hospital or a doctor's facility are risking their lives to take care of other people, and they are all heroes. It from the top surgeon over to, not down, but over to the custodians. I hope we keep that understanding past coronavirus. When there's a vaccine and we're not all so dependent on, if I get this, will there be people taking care of me? I hope that we realize that there have been people taking care of us on every level, from teachers and custodial workers at schools and people on the food chain line, from farmers who don't have necessarily the best health care in their communities or education in their schools. Sometimes they do. I'm not saying any stereotypical thing, but there are issues with rural America that there are sometimes, that we need to address. There are issues with urban America that we need to address. And every human life is as important as any other. No human life is more important than any other. And I think that in our gratitude for food supply workers and essential workers in healthcare, we're realizing that now. I hope it sticks. And frankly, this is the part I'm going to say right out. I hope we keep that in mind and use our voices to vote in November for people who have jobs that are not necessarily well taken care of.
Yeah. It's interesting because Ray and I have said completely, even though we have a show about sports, that we've never felt the priorities of the country were really great. When you have baseball players getting paid hundreds of millions of dollars, and no offense, good for them. That's not a shot at them.
Right.
But that happens. But the local kindergarten teacher can't survive,
Right.
And same thing with healthcare workers, and like you said, sanitation workers and anybody on the front line of this thing. And I agree with you that we're really seeing that now, and I hope it does move on. I mean, this is a war time. It might not be an actual war against other people, but one of the great things and one of the things I respected about that World War II generation, who weren't perfect and openly admitted that, was that there was appreciation for what they were willing to sacrifice. And in fact, that's what today's all about, right? Memorial Day. And that there was an appreciation in this country for a time after the World War II and all the wars that people realized that, I love baseball, but these people fought for our freedom. And these people are literally fighting for our lives. And many of them are sacrificing their health and their lives for other people. So I agree with you 100%. I hope that continues. And to go back to what I was saying before about just go outside. The one thing that's just not being reported widely enough is all the good that's happening. I have had more people say, "Hi, how are you?" from 6 feet away, and more people offer to do nice things and just the general optimism of people outside than I've ever seen in my life, ever. Yeah. Outside when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, everybody was really nice then too. Okay. Right? Yep. Philadelphia is not the nicest place in the world usually, okay? But I've never seen it like this. And the thing is, it just shows you that there is an equally good side to people than bad. I mean, if you want to focus on the negative, you will drown in that. You have to see the balance. That's one of the brilliances of this time. So again, Ray, I'm going to keep mushing here if you don't ask another good question. So I'm going to.
No, well,
I love hearing you speak. I mean, honestly, I'd pay to hear you speak. Just when you go on your tour, yeah. I'll be there. It's both of you, wonderful stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. I did have a quick question. Getting back to the root of everything, something that's been I don't want to say bothering me, but something that I've found yeah, I will say it's bothering me, is that obviously on social media, cyberbullying, that stuff has really become very, it's very prevalent still, unfortunately, in our society. And what I love about your organization is like we said earlier, trying to bring the bullies on, get everybody on the same team from a young age. I want to know, is there a way to try and get these bullies now who might not know anything better and have been bullying maybe for 30, 40 years, who have grown up, like you said, they're hurting, right? They've been hurting all this time. How do we now, maybe as they're older and maybe taking it out in online forums in ways that are unfortunate, how do we get them onto our team even then? Is there a way to reach out to maybe older bullies? Because even us, even as adults, we get bullied. You know, it doesn't end with school and with children and whatnot. It doesn't stop necessarily. So is there a way to bring everybody, even later in life, onto the same team?
Absolutely. I believe so. And what we need to do is create a culture of kindness that's so inclusive and so full of joy and so full of wonder, the fun of being good to each other, the fun of caring and loving and standing up for people who need us. I think that when we create that kind of culture, the more pervasive that is, the less bullying we'll have. But unfortunately, there are still people that think it's cool to say things that, you know, they get a razz out of people, or they say something unkind and then people laugh. And no, that's not the way to be. And I think what we need to form is a culture where everyone says, not on my watch. I'm sorry. You do not get to speak to her that way. Not on my timeline, not in my
Absolutely.
Not in my news feed, not in my Twitter or my Facebook feed, not anywhere. And when we stand up and shut bullies down, much like Ray, you were saying that you did in school, statistics say that bullying stops within, there are different statistics on this, but over 50% of the time, bullying will stop within 10 seconds if somebody just stands up against the bully. The bully is fear-based anyway. That's why they're bullying. So that's the kind of culture that we need to create, where people are willing, and then where we spread the joy of kindness. I know that's easier said than done, but if we can show people, like my face hurts from smiling right now, thinking and talking. When we can show people how much fun it is, being kind is not a soft pink and blue, oh, isn't that sweet, kind, oh, you're working with children. No, it's ferocious.
Yeah.
It's black and white and red, and it's fierce, and standing up sometimes has consequences. But in the long run, there's so much joy. And that's the message we need to share.
Absolutely. You know, I'll follow up on that too, is, you know, and actually, there's another thing I haven't talked about publicly before. One of the things I've really tried to do to better myself over the last few years is rid from my language, because I'm not innocent when it comes to saying things that hurt people, even if it's by accident. A lot of times people do that by accident. But I can tell all of our listeners right now, there's vocabulary that I have rid from my language, because I didn't realize it was hurtful at one point in my life, or it might have been a fad at one point of life to say something. For example, in the 90s, it was very common to say, don't be gay. Like, we've all heard that phrase, right? And the thing is, you know, looking back on it now, I'm horrified that I said that as much as I did. Now, I didn't mean anything by it at the time, but that must have been incredibly hurtful to any gay people that I was around. And I didn't even think about it. And another one, and so I don't say that anymore. Obviously, I haven't said that in years. Right. Another one that I'll tell you this, because my wife really kind of got me on this one, and it was an immediate change. Was I played sports, so a word we throw around a lot in sports is don't be starts with the P ends and a Y. Okay, I'm not going to say it on the show. And I remember one time in my early years with my wife, she said to me, "I don't know why you say that. You know, we birth children." She goes, "If I flick you down under, you just drop in a second." And she goes, "That's weakness." I'll never forget that, right? And I realized right then, but the thing that I realized is, I mean, she's right. But the thing I realized was that, like, I'm degrading women every time I say this. I'm saying women are weak every time I say this, even if I don't mean to. So sometimes it's things like that, in addition to being kind, it's you have to take a stand with yourself and say, I'm not going to say that anymore. That's not correct to say that anymore. And then, like I have employees that work for me. If they say, like you said, I'll stop them. Like, we don't say that here. Don't say that.
Right.
And then I also explain why they shouldn't say it. I don't just say it like, this is why. But yeah, like you said, boys. Now, I was fortunate enough. I was fortunate enough to play a sport where you're allowed to fight. And fighting is a lot of the mutual respect of the game, at least when I was growing up. But here's the thing is, and again, I'm trying to equate this because I'm not encouraging anyone to fight. Just put that right at the top here. But in hockey, that's how you earn the respect of opposing players, right? If you couldn't take it. And the thing is that not actual fisticuffs, but having the courage to stand up to someone and say, look, like you said, it's enough. It's not okay. I'm not going to take this. Right. You shouldn't say that to that person. That makes you more of a hero than you possibly know. And you probably have no idea what it means to the person that you may be protecting. All right. It might be someone who has never had anybody stand up for them before. Right. One of the things that I was super, super blessed with, and I'm super aware of this, is when I came home from school, in addition to Star Trek and Star Wars, I had two parents that loved me, and I knew it. Okay. And I was fortunate. It wasn't until I got older that I realized that I had a safe place to go after I got teased. A lot of kids don't even have that. I became hyper aware of that. The broken family or the parents who just are not capable of showing love to their children, even if they love their kids, right? To let those people know they're not alone. Like it's an important message. And like I said, I'm starting to jabber again here, but I wanted to say that because you got to stand up. Yeah. You got to stand up to yourself. You got to stand up to others, and you got to talk about what's right. And you'll feel good if you do it. You will feel good if you do it. That's why I stand up to Ray all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Right.
No. But I think to lead to your point, I think it goes back to also what Chase said earlier. Part of it is education, right?
Yeah.
Part of it is you have to want to better yourself, but you also have to be educated. And sometimes it's somebody else bringing that to your attention, like Jan bringing that to your attention, Lee, or at some point you bring it to yourself, or you bring it to your employees, right? Like sometimes you have to make that call and you have to educate somebody for them to want to make the change. So I think that's part of it too.
So
absolutely.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, please go. I love hearing you. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I was going to transition here because our audience is going to kill us if I don't ask one Star Trek question. Okay. So, but we pride ourselves on transitions here. So I'm going to try and make a really good transition. Okay. In addition to having good parents, one of the geek heroes of my youth was Captain Benjamin Sisko of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Okay. Because he was incredibly flawed as a character. And the thing is, when you look at some of the other characters in Star Trek, while they had their flaws, Jean-Luc Picard was, he was a hard-nosed guy, but he was always trying to be perfect until Picard came out, which we'll talk about in a minute. But, all the other Star Trek shows through history were voyaging through space and finding ways to come together. And it's, the next mission and the next mission. Deep Space Nine changed the Star Trek game because they weren't voyaging through space. It dealt with a lot of political things. It dealt with a planet that was in peril, characters that you played from Bajor who were, essentially enslaved. It dealt with a wormhole. I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm not going to go through all of Deep Space Nine, okay? Not to mention, and I'm not going to get into this, but from what I've read and seen now, there was a lot of turmoil on set. So this was an incredibly hard show to make. There's a whole documentary about that if people want to know more about that. Okay, the question I have for you, so again, Sisko was an amazing character to me because he was flawed. He dealt with major issues, losing people that were close to him. So when it comes to Deep Space Nine, and again, you played the character of Leeta, who had an amazing arc on the show, even though you weren't in an amazing amount of episodes, you had an amazing arc on the show. What did Deep Space Nine, how did that change sci-fi for you? And I know you get asked that a lot, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it myself.
Thank you. What a great question. Well, first, I would love to talk about some of the things you just said to address the way that Deep Space Nine changed sci-fi in general. I mean, the fact that Michael Piller, who was the original creator of the show, and then Ira Bear after Michael. The fact that these guys made a stand to create Deep Space Nine as a serialized show rather than as an episodic was so brave. And what it did was it placed a lot of confidence in the audience that they would turn up week after week to see what was happening. You couldn't really watch the show and then watch it again 3 or 4 weeks later.
No, there's no way you could. Yeah.
Right. So that's a lot of trust. And when there's that much money on the line, that's a whole lot of trust. And then there's careers on the line like theirs. And they still made this, they still were committed to this being the way the show would roll out. And therefore we fell in love with the characters in ways that were deep and rich and invested. And we could see the relationships of the families and obviously Sisko and his son.
Yeah, Jake.
Geek, Sirach Lofton, who's still a wonderful friend, and different people and how they reacted to the environment of war and what was happening on the station. And whereas other Star Trek shows boldly went into other planets and universes, etc., Deep Space Nine boldly went into ourselves, into the characters and the relationships, into the psyches and the issues of war and peace and the cost of violence and the importance of taking risks and doing the right thing even when it's difficult, and integrity. And all of those issues were forefront. They were really, those were the stars of the show. And people therefore got invested. So really, I say this every time I get a chance, hats off to these writers who were forerunners, because now every show on television is serialized.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was really ahead of its time. One of the things, again, you mentioned about Sisko is to give the audience that might not have watched the show an idea of what I'm talking about. This is a character who always tried to do, for most part, the right thing, but would lose. In the first episode, in the first minutes of the first episode, he loses his wife. He loses a battle and loses his wife. And then, later in the show, he loses his best friend and leaves the station, something he's not supposed to do. And then I won't spoil the ending of the show, but I remember that because this was a time in my life when I was watching this that it really impacted on me. You can do everything right and still not win, but it's how you respond to it. And he was always relentless in his response, even when he was knocked down. But like that, again, when you look at the other Star Treks, and they are phenomenal shows, but they always win at the end of the episode. There's not. It's very rare in the other Star Treks that you lose. You find a way. There's a problem. There's a solution. Next episode, right? Or if you don't find the solution, there's a second part to the episode. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what was fun, and my follow-up question to this is, we just had Picard released, and which was very much Deep Space Nine in terms of how they wrote that. In my opinion, it's focusing on Picard, but a very different version of him. But and again, I'm not asking you for the answer to this, but when Deep Space Nine ended, when that show concluded, all right, it left the Star Trek universe in a very awkward and weird position where basically the Federation was destroyed, almost. It was in ruin. I'll put it that way. And this massive war had just ended. Again, I won't spoil the end of the show for anybody that might want to watch it. But Picard was actually the first show that's come out since then that continued that timeline. So outside expanded universe literature and comic books, do you think that we'll ever get any bridge to the gap between those two things? Or do you think it's better if we just kind of we moved on from there, we're moving on to the next level?
Well, unfortunately, there won't be any more Deep Space Nine as a show or a series. I mean, as a movie. That was never going to be the case. With Next Gen, they wrapped the show and then they were back. I think they wrapped the show on a Friday and they were back on the movie on Monday. Yeah. They just have an end in that way. Deep Space Nine, we knew that was it.
Of course.
And I'll take the time to say one wonderful thing about Deep Space Nine was we really did know what we had when we had it. We really the power of the stories and the integrity and power of that writing team was so strong, and that's why they've gone on to write so many other major shows on television. Every single one of them have gone on. Ira Bear, Ron Moore, Robert Hewitt Wolfe, David Weddle, and Bradley Thompson. They're just Renee Echevarria. Their work continues. I just feel like I really want to say their names because they're just they made the show to be the incredible thing it was. But the bottom line is that gap I don't think will be filled. Star Trek Online is a game that I absolutely love. And one thing you do get with Star Trek Online is more Deep Space Nine. There's more Ferengi storylines. There's a fun Ferengi heist in one.
And you're in that game too, aren't you? If I'm not mistaken.
I am. Yeah. I play Leeta, Leeta Rom's wife, 30 years later, like in the timeline where it's progressed. So there's a storyline that takes place like now with that gap. I also play Hollow Leeta, which is as Leeta was, very gentle and pure in that era. And then I also play Mirror Leeta, who is raucously evil, just monstrous.
I was gonna say, that must be fun to play.
She is monstrous, and she's also monstrous because she's afraid, which I know enough to know. So it's a really interesting mix. I often say she would eat the Borg Queen for breakfast and come back for more. So in that you get more Deep Space Nine, not just me, but a lot of us. Most of the actors from DS9 are in Star Trek Online. Unfortunately, not every, but most of the actors.
It's really good to know though, because I know a lot of us were left with that gap because this show was so far ahead of its time. It really was. I mean, there's no other way to look at it in terms of what they were able to accomplish. And again, from turmoil came something beautiful. You know, that it was really a major part of my life. So again, sorry to geek out with you, although it is Geeks Who Like Sports, but you know, I tell you that.
So nice. It really is to know that this work that we were so invested in however many years ago is still something that people are invested in. It means a lot. Thank you both.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that show. I can't say that enough. Ray, go ahead again. I'm going to start mushing out. I don't want to do that.
No, I mean, I think I'm good. I think I think all that's left is Chase. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day and sitting down with us and doing an episode. And you have to come back. You have to come back at some point.
That's so lovely. Well, I'm sitting here thinking of all my friends that I want to refer to you now to you got to go do Bailey's show. I mean, you guys are fantastic. I love your hearts and I love what you stand for. And I've had a blast. I don't always say that, but I've had a blast with you. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Goes both ways.
Yes, definitely. Yes, please come back. Of course, again, go to popculturehero.org if you want to learn more about the Pop Culture Hero Coalition. And also, I guess, go pick up a copy of Star Trek Online. Like, what are you doing? Like,
I feel kind of sheepish about that now.
This is a really shameless plug, but if people want to support our work, we do these T-shirts in-house.
Oh.
And
that's awesome.
Thank you. They're in men's and women's sizes and styles. We also have the classic version. And what I love about these shirts is that it can be very difficult to get funding for big educational projects unless you're a big educational team, which we weren't. Now we're getting to be. But for years, we just were us. We funded it ourselves for 2 years, Carrie and I, and then, it's just, we've been putting this together in trickles. $25 at a time, people have shown empathy and care for this work and bought a shirt, and that's how we've paid our psychologists and our educators and done the other things like, website and videos and things that are necessary for this. So I love that it's crowdsourced empathy. So anybody who wants a shirt, it's bekindmerch.org, and that's our in-house Be Kind campaign. So that's
I will tell you two things right now, because it wasn't shameless at all what you just did. Number one. So two things, and Ray will hold me to this. I will get one of those shirts, and The next time Ray and I do a con together, because we get invited to those, I will wear it on stage at the con, and I will tell everybody why I'm wearing it. So that's what we will do. And I'm saying it here publicly so people know that I'm going to do it.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'll just take this opportunity to say my work is all volunteer. I've never made a dime on this work since I founded the organization in 2013. Everybody's support goes really directly into creating these programs and making it a better world. And thank you for who you are and your voices doing that so beautifully.
It goes both ways.
Yes, thank you so much. Chase, thank you again for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Awesome. So, so that does it for this episode of the Geeks Who Like Sports Leaderboard interview. And we will see you all next time. Thank you again for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Much love, guys. Thanks so much again.